Hi there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Emma, and in this series, Alignment Fundamentals and Posture Labs, we are covering alignment basics, safety, and then different things on how to tweak different poses. So this is episode 21 of our Posture Labs. This is Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana, so revolved hand to big toe pose. I have heard this called other things like dancing Shiva pose or twisted big toe pose. Same idea. You can also do this seated, but generally this pose is done standing. So that's how we're going to do it. I might recommend checking out episode 20 as we did regular big toe pose, Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana. So maybe you want to check that one out first, as the setup is pretty much the exact same. We're just adding a twist. I will start from the ground up, but you might find some additional cues in that video that would be helpful. For this pose, you can use the wall or something to help support you. I actually have a bar here at the studio, so I might give you some modifications with that. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is a balancing pose and a twisting pose. I want to focus on the hip alignment when we do this. When we're standing regular, our hips are even. When we do this pose, we have a tendency to lift one hip higher than the other. So while you're doing this pose, just think about keeping your hips on an even plane. I'll do this from the side and facing you so you can see what I mean. Let's go ahead and try this pose. We're first going to get into regular Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana. So I'm going to take my left hand and grab my left waist. I'm going to actually reach my right peace sign fingers down for my right big toe. I'm going to keep my knee bent for now. So my right hip already hikes up a little bit. I'm not going to worry about it now until I get into the pose. I'll be extending my right leg forward. As I do that now, I want to sink my right hip, plug my right shoulder back. You'll find more cues for this pose in episode 20 where we cover this pose entirely. However, assuming we can get into Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana nice and safely, then we're really just adding a twisting component here. So I already have my right leg extended. I'm going to take my left hand, grab outside my right foot, so the pinky side edge. And then I'm actually going to use my right hand and kind of push my right waist down as I start to turn to the right. Then I'll be reaching my right arm back. Now while I'm in this pose, I want to think about sinking my right hip, lifting up my left hip. If my right leg is kind of crossing my midline, I'm trying to press it back out to the right. I'm expanding my chest across my collarbones. Eventually, I might look back at my right hand. Crown of the head lifting, tailbone scooping towards that left heel. Low belly, nice and firm. And then I'll bring my right hand back to my waist. Release my left hand and set my foot back down onto the mat. Now this pose is pretty challenging, so of course there's modifications. I'll show you the modification on the other side. Let's shift the weight into the right leg. The right hand will be to the waist. Say I can't take my peace sign fingers to my left big toe, or I simply don't want to. I might grab my left knee instead for modified Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana. I'm still thinking about my hips being nice and even, that left hip sinking and the right hip lifting a little bit. So I've got the knee instead, and that's what I'm going to do for Parivrtta as well. I'll take my right hand to the outside of my left knee, my left hand to my waist. I'm going to start to turn my chest to the left and then reach my left arm back. Keep sinking the left hip and lifting the right hip. Now I want to keep my left toes flexed, so my left leg is still nice and active even though it's not straight. If the left knee starts to cross the midline, that's pretty easy to do. Keep pressing that left knee out into the right hand. Still here, I might look back at my left hand, twisting a little bit more, expanding across my chest for 3, 2, and 1. Release left hand to the waist and right back down. That's a wonderful modification because it's a lot on the IT band. It's a lot to straighten the leg. A lot of us, especially if we have really long legs, so I don't, which is why this pose might be a little bit easier for me. If your leg is a lot longer, it's going to be a lot harder to reach for it without rounding your back. And then here, if you're here rounding your back, I would way rather have you grab your knee, stand up nice and tall, and still get the twist, even if you're not extending the leg. You're still getting the benefits of the pose and doing it correctly. Let's go from the front. All right, so I'm going to do modified on the other side this time. So I'm going to start with my right hand to my waist again. I'm going to take my left peace sign finger and grab my big toe. I'll extend my left leg forward, focus on evening out the hips. So I'm standing on the right leg, plug the left shoulder back. Here it might be easier to see the hip alignment and to see when this left leg starts to cross my midline. So from here, I'm gonna take my right hand and reach for the outside edge of my left foot, the pinky side edge, grab that. I'm gonna take my left hand to my waist, press it down so I can stand up a little taller, and then reach my left arm back. I'm focusing on kicking my left leg out to the left to keep it from going across my midline. I'm sinking my left hip, lifting my right hip, expanding across my chest, and trying to stand up nice and tall. The last step would be to look back at the left thumb for 3. Flex the left toes, 2. And 1. Left hand to the waist, and unwind. Bring that left leg back down. Common to see some shaking in the pose. It's way harder once you start to turn the gaze back. So if you're just learning the pose, maybe you keep the gaze in one spot and take that as the last step, bringing the gaze back. Let's do the modified version on the other side. I'm shifting my weight into my left leg and bringing my right knee up in front of me. My right hand is grabbing the knee. So I'm in modified Parivrtta Hasta Padangustasana. Focus on leveling out the hips, and I want to keep this right knee in front of the hip. I don't want it to go across to the left. My left hand will grab my right knee. I'm going to keep pressing it out to the right as I start to turn to the right. Reaching my right arm back. Now focus on sinking the right hip, lifting the left hip. Got to squeeze my low belly. Feel the tailbone scoop or drop almost down towards that left heel. Flex the right toes and look back at my right hand for 3. Crown of the head lift, 2. And 1, unwind that. Now, of course, you can always use the bar. That might be helpful. So instead of grabbing the waist to start, I could grab the bar, but that's going to be the hand that has to reach. So that might not be super helpful, actually. I don't really see how here, maybe if I'm actually facing away from the bar and I'm going to be reaching back with like my left hand onto the bar, I could grab that. So if I'm going to be facing the camera, I could lift one knee up in front of me, take my twist, and then the arm that reaches back might grab onto the bar. That could be a great way to use a prop here. There's not really many ways to use a block in this pose. The modifications would just be to bend your knee instead of having a straight leg. Maybe use a bar that's behind you, or even stand up next to a bar or a wall, something that you can kind of lean into. You could even take the twist towards the wall where the leg closest to the wall is extended and you're kind of pressing into the wall, and then you might reach that arm back. So you're kind of leaning into the wall. You might be able to feel the twist a little bit deeper. However, you're not really working your balance as much. So that would also be a modification. Other ways to modify the pose would be to use a strap instead of bending your knee. So if you really want to extend your leg, maybe you really like that stretch, but you find that you're rounding your back, you could always take a strap around your foot and hold that with your opposite hand instead of that hand holding the foot. Then reach back. Gradually, you tighten the strap until maybe eventually you grab the foot. However, it's not mandatory to do the pose. Obviously, as I've showed you, you can do the pose multiple ways with many modifications. This pose does require quite a bit of hamstring flexibility. If you think about it, your leg has to be extended. Already here, I'm stretching my hamstring, and then if I do have long legs, it would be possible for me to lift my leg up higher to grab the foot. So that would mean I can do the pose, but it does require a little bit more hamstring and calf flexibility. So there's always things to work on with the pose. I say focus less on getting that leg straight, focus on getting the twist and feeling sturdy in the pose first. Then maybe you work to straighten the leg and grab the foot. I hope you found this helpful. You can also practice this on your back. It doesn't work the balance, obviously, but you can do a big supine twist on your back with the left hand grabbing the right foot, taking it across your body, and then looking off to the right. Now here, I can really focus actually on that hip alignment. So if I'm lying on my back with my right leg across, I want to even out those hips by sending the right hip towards the front of the mat and then imagine dragging my left hip, that's the bottom hip, up towards me. That's gonna give me that same activation, that same evening out of the pelvis that I'm trying to get standing. So I can still feel the same stretch here without the work. So no balance, but same stretch. If I do that on the left side, my left leg goes up, right hand grab the outer edge, take my left leg across my body to the right and look off to the left. Now I wanna flex or point my bottom foot so it's nice and active. My left hip is imagining it going forward, and then I imagine tugging my right hip up towards me. So I'm leveling out my pelvis. If I were to do that standing, it's like the left hip going down towards the mat, that was the front of the mat, and the right hip coming up, which was coming up towards me. So same idea, you can feel the leveling out of the pelvis a little more if you start on your back. And of course you can do the modification on your back too. That's what we usually do in a class, is like a bent knee supine twist. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any other tips or tricks that you find useful in this pose, make sure to leave those in the comments. I hope you got something out of this video. If you have any further questions, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you back next week.